Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has looking at 10 ways Americans and Europeans differ. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to scroll down the correct section and get ready to fill in the chart that has us describing and then analyzing key differences between Americans and Europeans. Remember, you can replay any part of this presentation for detail, clarity, or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. The grass can seem greener on the other side of the pond. Americans often covet the history, culture, and food associated with Europe, whereas Europeans are wowed by the US's affordable housing, gas prices, and megastores. So fascinating are the differences that residents of both areas often crisscross the ocean for a taste of the other continent. In fact, 17% of the US overseas travel was to Europe in 2016, more than any other destination by a long shot, with the Caribbean placing a distant second. But along with the travel, there are characteristics on each side of the ocean that make visitors go, We put together a list of 10 ways that Europeans and Americans differ. That's not to say that every single American or every single European is going to fall neatly into one of these categories. We're sure that not all Americans are obsessed with gaining a princess title, and there are probably some Europeans out there who love an iced Latin beverage, but for argument's sake, here are a few key but entertaining differences. Number 10. Kings, dukes, and princesses, oh my. When American actress Meghan Markle weds Prince Harry of Wales in May 2018, she'll fulfill a fantasy for many American girls, marrying a prince and getting a royal title. Outside of marriage, there's a little chance of Americans obtaining one. The US simply doesn't have any aristocracy or monarchy in place to facilitate such a system. That said, a couple of notable American citizens have earned their titles through marriage, including actress Grace Kelly, who married Prince Rainier III of Monaco in 1956, and urban planner Lisa Halaby, who wed King Hussein of Jordan in 1978 and became Queen Noor. So what accounts for this American fascination with the titles of the British royal family? They're not so interested in the other European royal families. It's just princess fever courtesy of Disney movies or love of imported dramas like Downton Abbey. It's been suggested that the reason is Americans see the British royal family as the equivalent of a long-running soap opera or reality show. But Boston University historian Ariane Chetrock thinks that it's about the special relationship between Britain and America. She told the New York Times that the Anglophilia in the U.S. dates back to just after the American Revolution ended British rule in 13 colonies. Their desire to retain that strong cultural tie, and I think that persists to this day, she told the Times. Meanwhile, Britain remains fond of the royals too. Despite some complaints about the amount of money it costs to maintain them, the percentage of the population that wants to do away with them has remained to 18 to 19% from 1969 to 2011. Titles in Europe are still typically passed down from the father to the eldest son, with daughters unceremoniously skipped over, which means that the title sometimes goes to a distant male cousin. Efforts have been made in recent years to alter this practice, and this potential change to hereditary peonage, as it's known, is still tied up in debate in 2018. The law was changed to give equal succession to females in the British royal family in 2011. Number 9. Ice, Ice Baby. Woe to the American who wants an ice-cold beverage while traversing Europe. Ask for ice in your soda and you might be treated to 1 or 2 cubes. A far cry from the filled cups of Americans are accustomed to. As with any cultural preference, there's probably not one simple reason why Europeans and Americans vary so widely on this topic of ice, but it's likely that the 20th century modernization of America played a role. While U.S. households become rapidly equipped with refrigerator freezers that easily dispensed ice, Europe lagged behind. Instead, Europeans were shipped ice from North America and asked to pay laughably high prices for something that they weren't so accustomed to using. As a result, ice never really took off there, and is sometimes even seen as a drink dualiter. The American fascination with ice could also be related to an early belief that it prevented illness-causing bacteria. In 1851, a doctor named John Gorey obtained a patent for an ice machine because he believed that cooled air, accompanied by hanging ice from the ceiling, could make exam rooms less infectious. Then in the 1950s, Kemmons Wilson, who founded the Holiday Inn chain, became the first to install ice machines in his motels, thus ensuring free availability to the product from coast to coast. But the most widely reason Americans love ice might simply be because many areas of the country get really, really hot for a significant part of the year, unlike, say, England, France, or Scotland. Thus, a literally ice-cold beverage brings much-needed relief. Number 8 is vacation time. Sure, some American-based companies like biotech firm Amgen Incorporated and Google offer generous vacation packages, 3 to 5 weeks, but by and large, when it comes to the amount of vacation time the average employee gets, the U.S. lags way behind many other wealthy nations, particularly those in Europe. In fact, the U.S. Department of Labor doesn't require employers to offer any paid vacation time to employees. Most companies offer 2 weeks or 10 days vacation per year, and that figure rising at some firms for long-standing workers. But 25% of American workers get no paid vacation at all. That is a far cry from Europe, where the European Union requires countries to supply a minimum of 20 vacation days every year for full-time employees, with some companies going above and beyond that, offering as many as 25 to 30 days off. The paid holiday situation is just as disparate, with most industrialized countries guaranteeing between 5 and 13 paid holidays every year. And while the US doesn't promise any, sadly the Americans who are most affected by the lack of adequate vacation days are low-wage or part-time employees, as well as those who work for small businesses. Several pieces of U.S. legislation have been introduced in Congress to mandate some type of paid vacation time for American workers, but all have died in the process so far. Number 7 is lots of languages. U.S. travelers to European cities are relieved to know that they can put away their foreign language phrasebook or app. Many Europeans speak fluent English in addition to their native tongues and often another language as well. The majority learn these at their respective educational systems, which almost always require students to study their first foreign language between ages of 6 and 9. In 2010, 73% of the European children in primary school and 90% of secondary students were learning English. Additionally, more than 20 European countries required students to pick up a second additional language later on. By contrast, foreign language requirements vary in the U.S. by school system. With nothing set in stone by federal law, typically students aren't exposed to another language until around age 13 or 14, which makes fluency hard to come by. Just 25% of American adults speak a foreign language, and those that do, the vast majority, 89%, learn it at home rather than at school. Number 6 is free healthcare. Americans might dream of a society where they don't have to pay out of pocket for healthcare services, save that for occasional prescription or optical or dental services. That's what Brits get, courtesy of their National Health Service, or NHS. Some 64.6 million people in England, Scotland, and Ireland get free healthcare at a point of use. Of course, it's not really free since it's funded by the UK taxpayer dollars, but Americans also pay tax dollars to find their way to healthcare systems. For instance, for Medicaid and Medicare. Yet Americans likely still have to buy private health insurance, as well as pay deductibles, co-insurance fees, and many costs or any costs not covered by their insurance provider. European countries manage healthcare in different ways across the continent, but the governments usually fund some or most of it. Sweden, for instance, funds most of its system with local taxes, and patients pay a nominal fee for services. In France, it is compulsory to buy healthcare insurance. Premiums are deducted from workers' paychecks, and when you go to the doctor, the cost of the visit is reimbursed by the government via a smart card, and it's swiped when you visit. However, as European populations age and need more expensive treatments, their governments face some form or of the same funding issues that America is dealing with. And the NHS, for example, for one, is routinely criticized because patients are subjected to excessively long wait times, both for treatment and tests, and the British Red Cross refers to it as a humanitarian crisis and has been called in to help out many hospitals. Nevertheless, the US still outspends all European countries on health care, at 16% of its GDP, and yet Americans have shorter life expectancies, higher rates of chronic diseases like diabetes, and more. Number 5 is gap years. American high schoolers have traditionally launched straightway into college, technical school, or the job market post-graduation. However, bit by bit, they are opting to do what many Europeans have done forever, take a gap year. In fact, 2006 to 2014 saw a 20% uptick in Americans taking gap years. Gap years started in England in 1967 when 3 students went from Britain to volunteer in Ethiopia courtesy of a company called Project Trust. In 1977, an organization was set up in the UK to provide volunteer opportunities between high school and college. In 2012, more than 5% of accepted British university applicants took a gap year, while just 1.2% of US-based students did in 2011. The gap years intend to be a time of personal growth where a young person can find out more about career goals or themselves by volunteering, interning, traveling, or learning a foreign language. U.S. gap year programs can be pretty expensive, to the tune of $35,000 or so, and the more affordable options are difficult to get into. Some colleges like Princeton and the University of North Carolina do offer a gap year fellowship, though. But apart from the cost, Americans are less likely to do gap years because they usually have many opportunities to volunteer and study abroad while in high school or college. There's also fear among U.S. parents that if their kids take a year off, they may not enroll in higher education. But the American Gap Association reports that 90% of students who participate in their programs enroll at a 4-year institution within 12 months of finishing their gap year. Further, 96% of students who've enjoyed a gap year say that the experience has helped them develop as a person. Number 4, God is my co-pilot. In 2015, 53% of Americans said religion was very important in their lives compared to 28% of Poles, which was the highest percentage of a European country. Just 21% of Brits and 14% of French people said the same thing. So why has religion remained so popular in the US? One theory is that since churches there aren't funded by the state, they have been market-driven in order to survive, which may explain the popularity of megachurches tricked out like rock arenas, as well as prosperity gospel preachers like Joel Osteen, who have seen a message of Americans and others like to hear. About 37% of Americans attend church weekly. By contrast, 80% of Norwegians are baptized into the state-funded Church of Norway, but only 2% attend services weekly. When a state creates a relationship with religion, religious leaders no longer have the same impetus to go out and to get people excited. Researcher Philip Schwadl told NPR in 2017. They get money from the state through taxes, so they don't have to collect money from their congregates. There are signs that religiosity is declining in the U.S. as well. From 2009 to 2015, the percentage of Americans who said their religious affiliation was none rose from 16% to 23% of the population. Among millennials, it was 35%. Number 3 is the metric system. In the U.S., measurement is about all feet, ounces, and Fahrenheit. Most everywhere else, however, people use meters, liters, and Celsius. American devotion to the archaic system, called the U.S. customary system, dates way back to 1821 when the Secretary of State John Quincy Adams said thanks but no thanks to going metric. President Andrew Johnson signed a law in 1866 that allowed contracts, court proceedings, or dealings to use the metric system, but it failed to take off. In 1975, the Metric Conversion Act was passed, along with the Trade and Competitiveness Act of 1988, making another attempt at encouraging adoption of the system. But the inherent problem is that all of these laws are voluntary, meaning that these states, businesses, and anyone else can adopt the system if they want to, but they don't have to. It's a pain in the neck to learn a new measurement system, so who's going to do it if it's not mandated? Government mandate is how the metric system took off in many countries, and the UK went metric in the 1960s. Experts claim, however, that failure to fall in line with the rest of the world makes doing business ultra-confusing and actually hurts the American economy. Oddly, the metric system has hold in some quarters of the U.S. economy, such as the 2-liter soda, which brings to us our next difference. Number 2 is Supersize Me. Back in the 1990s, in the U.S., a cheeseburger was 4.5 ounces and a soda was 6.5 ounces. Fast forward 20 years, the typical burger is now 8 ounces and the soda is 20 ounces. No wonder 36.5% of Americans are actually obese. Portion sizes in Europe are much smaller on average, and those found in the United States, where restaurant portions have doubled, even tripled in recent decades. Even WebMD reported in 2003 that a portion size in Paris was 25% less than one Philadelphia. Meanwhile, typical soda drink in Philly was 52% larger than in Paris. But the bigger is better trend seems to be taking hold in Europe too. Portion sizes related to obesity have been less extensively studied there, but a 2014 study published in the journal Advances of Nutrition found that the portion trends in Europe are mirroring American habits, especially in the arenas of fast food and snack foods. Some 23% of women and 20% of men in the EU are obese, and the numbers are growing. Experts have called for European Union to follow the U.S. lead and mandate serving sizes and nutritional information on food packages. This would avoid confusion because, as it stands now, individual brands can determine their own. And number 1 is très chic or not très chic. Europeans often say that you can tell an American tourist a mile off. The cargo shorts, t-shirt with the sports team logo, and sneakers are dead giveaways. Meanwhile, Americans say you can spot European tourists in the U.S. because they wear socks with sandals. Know how to tie a scarf and never smile at strangers? Generalize much? We can say this, while Americans will dress up at times, they usually don't, and they put a lot of value in comfortable, functional clothes like yoga pants, running shoes, and loose-fitting tops, especially when traveling. Europeans are known to prefer tailored, form-fitting clothing, often in muted colors. In fact, some travel blogs insist that American tourists who wishes not to stand out in Europe should avoid common wardrobe staples like brightly colored jackets, running shoes, oversized t-shirts, and more. And the advent of casual clothes stateside can be traced back to the addition of sportswear, then shorts into American wardrobes in the early 1900s. Women later begin to don comfortable, all-purpose unisex clothes like jeans, cardigans, t-shirts, further encouraging a shift away from binding uncomfortable clothes. Fashion historian Deidre Clemente wrote in a piece for Time, to dress casual and quintessentially to dress as American and to live, or to dream of living fast and loose and carefree. But for all the hours and articles, I've long known why I dress casual and it feels good. So there you guys have it, some of the key differences between Americans and Europeans when it comes to the cultural aspects of life and living. Hopefully you found this to be a huge help. Good luck with completing the rest of the lesson and this part of the section. Thank you very much for tuning in.